Welcome to the Performance Banker Podcast. You'll hear banking industry experts providing unique insights and expertise to help bankers achieve higher performance, obtain outstanding results, and gain a competitive advantage. Here's your host, Tanya Gossage.
Keith, hello, and welcome to the Performance Bankers Podcast. It's been a long time. How are you?
Doing well, Tanya. It has been a while.
Keith Henkel is the founder and the CEO of FI Works, which is a data-driven sales and marketing software platform built specifically for financial institutions. I worked with Keith for about 14 years. Is that about right, Keith?
Seems like longer, Tanya, but I think 14 years is probably about right.
You taught me so much I'll never forget about data analytics. You made my job really fun. Honestly, you did. You know, growing customers, revenue, running campaign after campaign, monitoring performance results. It brings back so many memories. But before I tell your entire story, let you jump in here and let the audience know just a little bit about who you are and how you got started with FI Works.
Thanks, Tanya, for the kind words. So my journey in fintech goes many, many years ago to a company called Systematics here in Little Rock. And I've really been working toward the same goals for 30 plus years of my career, which is helping banks use data and analytics to know more about their customers and help them create communication programs to improve their experience. So I'm an old fintech guy. What got me started here was after a career at Axiom, realizing how the biggest banks in the country use data to power their operations. So I really wanted to see how those type of technologies can be brought to bear in the community banking market space.
That's great. So Keith, tell us a little bit about the problems that you help banks solve.
Yeah, I like to think about the problems and the way bankers ask questions of us or what we hear their statements. So we often hear things like, hey, I know I have all this data on my customers. I know it's in a bunch of different silos. How can I get access to that data? Once I have access to that data, what can I actually do with that? I really want to know things like how my customers behave, what type of products and services they use today, what type of products and services they actually need from me. And beyond the typical way banks have done this in the past of throwing products and services at their customers to see who bites, can you use the information to do what big companies have done for years, like Netflix and Amazon with product recommendations, using the data to power conversations with bankers? So that's kind of a common theme we see all the time when we talk to institutions.
Yeah, I love that. Again, that brings back a lot of memories and the ways that, you know, banks can definitely increase customer retention, cross-sell. So great opportunities there. What is one of your favorite stories that you can share with us regarding maybe results or successes that you can remember?
Yeah, so a lot of these, as you remember, Tanya, you were with when I was working with you, and we've seen similar things since then. But one of the earliest ones we did was a really kind of basic idea on how do we go out there and find new non-interest income amongst the current clients. And we found that the debit card penetration ratio in those days was well below market. And so, you know, we were able to together, you know, come up with a strategy of going out and mining the data to find the customers that would be most likely to accept a card offer and then use that card to generate interchange revenue. And I think from the beginning of that idea to when we actually had real results was only about 8 to 9 weeks. From creating the idea to being able to record that on the back end. And those campaigns, I think they're probably some of the most successful campaigns we've ever done that hit response rates in the 25% range.
Right.
That was one of my favorite times. It was a lot of fun working with you on that.
Well, I appreciate that. I'm glad that I could be part of those memories. But like you say, you know, thinking out of the box, and that's one of the things that I loved about your system, is just being able to, you know, set behind closed doors, if you will, and just think about all of the creative ways to generate income, and then just be able to get on the phone with you and just bring an idea, and then for us to just strategize, and maybe you might say, well, Tanya, no, that won't work, but we possibly could do this, and we would come up with some phenomenal ideas and campaigns to run. And so but like you say, that was a great campaign.
Yeah, it was. We did a lot of things in a hurry in those days.
Yes. So what are some of the toughest challenges that banks have had to overcome?
Well, you know, the first one, I think, and this is probably true of a lot of industries, is understanding what the problem is, and understanding that you need to go solve that problem. So early days, we would talk to banks and everything was great. They were making money. You know, when banks are making money, they don't necessarily go look for things that could make improvements, especially if it's in technology. So the first step is just really, you know, it's not unlike AA, you're recognizing and agreeing that you have a problem.
Right.
So the next step is just, this is the hardest for banks, I think, is both the data in their core system and all the other ancillary products that banks have, especially today when there's a new fintech product or service that needs to be sold. Seems like every 6 months, banks are introducing something. So the world of data silos has grown dramatically since the days when you and I first started working on this. So today we have customers that ask us to integrate 20 to 30 different data sources where customer data exists. And that's just not something that bank IT departments really know how to do. So that's the biggest hurdle to overcome. And that's one of the biggest questions we get now. As I said before, how do I get access to this data I know I have and make use of it?
So Keith, tell me, in talking about challenges, you know, oftentimes when, you know, bankers are responsible for bringing in new business, and, you know, maybe they're on LinkedIn and they're trying to find new prospects, or they go to Google and they just start looking for people. Oftentimes, some of the tools could be right underneath their nose. But one of the things that you and I did, that you have access to, or that we have access or had access to within FI Works, is the ability to run campaigns for our lenders within giving leads and having lead generation within, you know, a 2-mile radius, a 3-mile radius. Talk to me a little bit about how that works and the opportunities that someone could have within the tool there.
Yeah, so you know the classic model is you know, a little like shots in the dark. So you go to Google, you go to, in the old days, Yellow Pages, or you walk down the street to see what businesses are open. And it's just really hard to find who's out there and then sort through those people, know who might be a good candidate. So the leadless business has been around forever. And usually you contact a vendor and you pull a list, and then you got to sort through that list. So the thing we can do, it's a little bit different, is we can look at the data that shows the best customers that you have today, and then try to clone a list that look just like them. So if you start from a smaller list, there's less people to concentrate on. And then you have to be able to go through that. You can't do it with a spreadsheet. You can't go through there and check things off and then try to remember who you did. You have to have some sort of software for that. And that software has to be something that's really brain dead simple for a banker to use to go through their data list of activities. So, you know, that's the type of thing we do with our platform that maybe is a little bit different than the older business development processes.
So Keith, how does a bank and their staff get their teams to transition to a new tool like this? Because oftentimes, they've brought in staff maybe that have come from larger banks that have been accustomed to maybe a lot of sales and had really strict processes behind logging things into a CRM and coming into a system such as this. How do we get them to transition into this process?
Yeah, that's a great question. And, there's several different parts of that transition, from realizing you need to be more data driven in decision making. And especially in the community banking world, which is all about personal relationships, you have to be able to look at the numbers as much as you look at those personal relationships to understand where you are. So one of the things we implemented first with you guys back in the day was a system of measurement scorecarding. And I remember one of the first meetings we had, I can remember it in the training room, we had a pilot group of about a dozen of the more proactive bankers. And the first time they saw some of their key performance indicators, they were shocked at the values, and they started running around the room comparing each other's numbers. And it was like an immediate competition between these bankers, these younger bankers, as to who had the best and the worst numbers. And I remember after one of those conversations, one of the more proactive bankers realized that their growth in that branch was not what she thought it would be. And she literally started walking streets in her areas and perusing phone books like we talked about before, trying to determine, what else she could do. And the measurement exposed areas for improvements. So that's kind of one of the cultural shifts. And I believe your CFO at the time had just gotten back from a conference where scorecarding was one of the main topics. So we happened to hit that at the right time and introduce that idea. And it really changed the way the bank was looking at performance overall. Later, you adopted that into actual branch performance numbers. So you were looking at and compensating people based off metrics that heretofore had been a little bit invisible. So if you don't know your customer attrition, you don't know percentage of people with debit cards, percentage of people with mobile banking, it's kind of hard to know what problem to focus on. So I'd say that's kind of the cultural challenge number one. And then realizing that the next step is using data to really target those areas. So there's always, and I've seen this with different institutions, hey, my number really doesn't look very good. Let's run around and scream and shout and try to do something about it, when you really kind of need to pause and say, let's let the data tell us where that problem is and what we need to do about it. The second piece, when you implement any system, of course, is getting people to use it. And if it's in any way optional, especially if it involves a CRM component, it's really hard to get something rolled out. So that starts with executive sponsorship at the top level, saying, look, this is something we're going to do. It's not optional. You're going to get training. The software has to be easy to use. So unlike something like Salesforce that takes up a degree, you have to have something that your typical branch banker can use that's really quick to do, and they can see quick results. So what you did when we were talking back in the days, we did the measurements, we identified a problem area, which happened to be debit cards, and then you came up with the ideas that we executed on that gave those branch bankers something to go talk to their customers about. And instead of this feeling they got from larger institutions of cold calling and selling products that people don't need, which left them really not wanting to use a CRM, we served up some really good opportunities matched with a KPI that measured where they were. And day by day, they could see those numbers change. So the feedback loop between measurement, doing something about it, seeing the results really encouraged them to go out and use the system more. And then right after that, I think we did onboarding next, if I recall, but there was always something new every quarter at a minimum that kind of follow the same pattern, something that can improve the way they related to their customers. Their customers felt better about the service they were getting. The users felt better about using the software because they were providing value, and you can just kind of have that feedback loop. But those, I think, are kind of the key ingredients. Wouldn't you agree?
Absolutely. It also speaks to that, what gets measured gets done.
Absolutely. Yes.
Yes, what gets measured gets done. And it's also, I say this all the time about for those people that are goal oriented, there's something about writing it to paper. The same with your pipeline. There's something about putting it in a CRM. If you put it in a CRM, you track it, you measure it, and then you watch it, you're going to do better than, someone else who doesn't. And so, those were some great times in being able to implement that. And then friendly competition, we had contests, friendly competition, and it made some good managers great, and it brought people who had a fear of reaching out because we provided them with scripts. They were no longer fearful, for reaching out and offering customers things that they needed. And that was the thing. It wasn't that we were offering a product that they didn't have. It was a product that the data analytics told us that they needed, because we were doing the debit card, for example. They didn't have a debit card, but we were matching them up to people who their portfolio or their account was just like somebody else that had one. So the analytics was telling us that they run the same types of transactions, or they mimic somebody who has one. So, in our mind is, why do they not have one? And did somebody not offer it at the new account opening? Why was that missed? Or did they choose at the account opening to not have one at that time, but now they need one and they've just not had time to ask? And so going through that process then of asking them at the time we ran the campaign, it was so successful. And then taking the extra step specifically for customers who I would say out of age that you might think that would not want a debit card or need a debit card, taking the extra step to take them out to the machine and show them how to use it, phenomenal results there.
Yeah, that's one of the things we found with using data analytics for that is the conventional wisdom sometimes just isn't right. So, one of the examples I've found through the years when CD markets were more active than they've been over the last couple of years is that the image people have in their head of a CD buyer is based off who currently owns the CD.
Right.
And so you think of the elderly, you think of people in their retirement phase of their life or past. And so what we found by looking at the data is that's not when people buy CDs. Yeah, they renew CDs, they may go look for new rates, but the age in which people adopt CDs for the first time, if you look at the data, is not the same as the profile of the people when you look at the portfolio of people that currently own them. So it's another thing of, listen to the data and not necessarily your intuition when you look at some of these things.
Yeah, I love that. It's phenomenal, in my opinion.
And the best thing about it, we were able to track results. So if you remember,
yes,
I think I'm remembering this number right. We hit something like $700,000 in annual interchange revenue improvement on the debit card campaigns. So there were some big numbers behind some of these things. And that, of course, gets everybody swimming in the same direction. When you can show the results.
Exactly. Well, and another one, thinking about paper statements versus e-statements, we went through that period where we really wanted to increase the number of e-statements and eliminate paper statements. And so, increasing that. So, there's just so many things that.
That often leads Tanya to kind of an analysis paralysis. So one of the other things that's kind of difficult that we navigated with you was really knowing where to start. So you have all this data, the data comes back, here's all your numbers, and then there's oh gosh, what do we do now? We need to do onboarding, we need to do this, we need to do this, we need to do that. And you can kind of get into this planning mode, as you all know, that you've seen before of being a little afraid to start. And, I think this is true of a lot of factors of life, but in some cases you just need to pick a place and start. And if you wind up starting at the wrong place, you recover. But that's better than sitting around waiting on the perfect answer to come.
Absolutely. Well, I think you're right. I think sometimes people buy technology and they go through the implementation phase and then they're like, now what? Or they have staffing changes or they don't have the appropriate staff to take care of it, and which causes challenges.
A lot of challenges with technology adoption in banking, for sure. If it's not something that regulation requires you to do every day, whatever you're trying to adopt, some cases, and what's fun from what I've seen, I've got a couple of smaller banks that are customers that they're actually more nimble in adopting fintech products. So, we're working on, marketing projects for things like just-in-time loans at checkout and, P2P services and all this new stuff that's come along. And, they're nimble because they're small. And sometimes the bigger banks aren't that nimble in adopting technology. They don't have a lot of technology, just money to spend.
Well, I continue to see more and more, I get a lot of emails from, just everything banking in general. And it seems like that, they continue to push a lot of the fintech companies now. Get on board with the fintech companies because, they're up and coming and they have a lot of great technology. And I've seen a lot of that in the past 3 years.
One trend I've noticed is banks that believe in order to compete, they have to turn into what the big bank does. So I have to have digital, I've got to have online account opening, I have to have all these things, which is true in today's world, but they can't lose sight of the success factor they have, which is community banking. So, in a lot of ways, you have to watch out for technology that disintermediates the bank from their customers. So if you make it, you can make it convenient for the new business, but at the end of the day, studies show the reason why people keep going back to community banks is they like the personal contact. So you got this technology and you deploy that, and you can open up an account real fast. But if you don't have some way of doing proactive outreach to those same customers, then they never get familiar with the banker. They have an office nearby, but what is the other reason to do business with a community bank if the convenience service of the digital products, make you look just like Bank of America?
I like building my relationship. Once I get my relationship built and I have my banker, then I'm okay with the technology, but I have to have my banker. I have to be able to text my banker, call my banker on her mobile phone, call her office, go see her.
I'm the same way, but I think the challenge that several people have expressed to me is how do you do that with the young it was millennials. Now the millennials are getting kind of old. But
Yeah.
yeah, how do you do that with people who have their first banking account? Gosh, it's easy to go out and set up something on Chime or one of their services, but
Mhm.
and that's why I think proactive outreach, and we did a lot of that during the onboarding campaigns when we were working with you. But
Mhm.
one of the things we're doing today with a couple of our customers, what we call nurturing,
Mhm.
which takes a similar approach to onboarding and just says, hey, if you're past your first year of life with us, you're out of our onboarding range. When does somebody talk to that person?
Mhm.
Usually when you're trying to sell them a product or they have a problem,
Mhm.
or the rare occasions where they may actually come into a branch. So, that's, I think, a gap in, marketing campaigns and customer experience programs today.
Mhm. Yeah. So what we've just been talking about is a great segue into the next question that I want to ask you, and that is, you know, um, how do you create buy-in from the employees who are concerned that the technologies that we've talked about that might take their job one day?
Yeah, and then, and I think early on in the CRM world, people justified CRM purchases by what kind of headcount it would reduce. So
Oh,
you start
yeah.
off your sales process trying to justify the ROI is really going to be on how many people you can do away with. It's
Yeah.
people have a reason to fear in some of those worlds. So I don't know that any of that ever worked. Unless you have like a call center or something like that.
Uh-huh.
The stuff like that, it's not like you can go fire half a person from a branch. So in reality, even though the software can make you more productive, it should just enable you to do more of what you're currently doing and do it better.
Uh-huh.
And if you can measure the results of those programs and campaigns, then it makes the staff look good.
Uh-huh.
If their performance numbers go up because of having software, it should really be a very positive feedback loop for them. But I've heard the same thing in terms of people fearing the technology is going to replace them. New
Uh-huh.
account opening is one of those where, we're going to have new account opening, and that means, branch staff might be reduced because less people are coming to the branch. Well, it's really the other way around. Less people
Uh-huh.
are coming into the branch, so you better be able to open up accounts online.
Yeah. Yeah. I did open my very first account online last week, and it was a seamless process. I actually really enjoyed it. Um, so, Keith, if people have questions about this technology and want to reach out to you, or they're interested in seeing a demonstration of the technology, how do they reach out to you? How do they contact you?
The best thing is for people to go to our website, which is fiworks.com. There's lots of good content out there. We have a very extensive resource library of articles that we've written. I think they're very educational. And there's certainly a contact us page and link on there. That will get to me in a hurry. And then that's the best way to kind of start a conversation like that. But there's also a newsletter we do. And there's a lot of great content we've written on the newsletter about topics like the ones we've been talking about. So I encourage people to also subscribe to that.
Mm-hmm. I would also encourage anyone who wants to see their blogs that come out, follow them on LinkedIn. That's another great resource
Mm-hmm.
to take a look at. I've enjoyed seeing your articles on LinkedIn. So, Keith, lastly, do you have any inspiring words for our audience as we end the podcast today, or would you like to share a story, leave a quote?
Well, I think if you could just kind of summarize some of the points we've been talking about, it's get started doing something.
Mm-hmm.
In this world where we have so much new things going on, it's important to be innovative,
Mm-hmm.
be smart about innovation, and that means looking at what's out there that may be different than what you've done traditionally. So again, dangerous words. We've always done it this way. People really got to get out of that mentality. And I think for the most part, community bankers are already doing that. This is not a business that sits around on their hands. And there's a lot of new innovation programs that have come in the last 2 or 3 years, like the Venture Center in Little Rock. in the ICBA FinTech and FIS FinTech programs there. So get involved, watch for what's coming out new. Don't be afraid to try something. Most of the FinTech vendors today have ways of working with you in a way that's pretty risk-free, so that you're not making some giant commitment to new technology.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And talk to your peers. There's going to be somebody out there that's already thinking or doing what you're doing.
Mm-hmm. Very true. Well, Keith, thank you for being with us. And for those of you in the audience, we appreciate you listening today. And if you liked something that you've heard today, leave it for us in the comments. We appreciate you being here for the Performance Banker podcast, and share it with a friend, forward it. We appreciate you. And until the next time, be great.
Thanks, Tanya.
Thank you, Keith.
Thanks for listening. Be sure to download and subscribe wherever you get your shows. Find more content on our YouTube channel. Link is in the show notes. This podcast is sponsored by GossagePerformanceConsulting.com.